Welcome to FoxTales Movie Club. I'm Sebastian Fox.
And I'm Tony Sherman. Each video we take a chosen movie and lead a discussion on our thoughts and opinions.
We will be getting into the character, plot, and technical achievements with no regard for spoilers.
So if you haven't seen this movie and don't want to hear said spoilers, you have been warned.
Also, stick around to the end to hear the topic for the next video.
Today's movie is The Martian.
The Martian is a movie that came out in 2015, directed by Ridley Scott, composed by Harry Gregson Williams, and stars Matt Damon.
And a bunch of other big name actors as well.
Yes.
Quite a few. A lot of interesting characters that we meet throughout the film. Little, almost kind of like cameos in some sense with some of these characters.
Yeah.
We'll get to. The movie starts off with a very interesting shot of Mars that we see.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely did a good job of creating a atmosphere that feels like Mars.
Right, yeah. We have the Wadi Rum is where it was filmed, somewhere in Jordan, and it seems as if a lot of Martian movies that have been set on Mars or use this kind of climate, use this location for filming, since as the movie shows, it's quite appropriate for the setting, very realistic.
I think this movie does a very good job of just kind of setting things up from the beginning, because the first few shots, or first scene, I guess, is just Watney and his team just kind of talking to each other, and
right,
kind of making fun of each other, and it just kind of shows you the relationship between all of them and how much they care for each other. Yeah.
I guess you kind of jump right into the movie, and you don't really know the characters as the viewer yet, but they've been on Mars for however long, a few weeks or something, I think it's been.
I think it started on Sol 18.
Sol 18 sounds right, yeah. So a couple weeks, and they had been traveling through space from Earth for however many days, I think like 200 days or something like that.
That's how long it took back. I think it was probably in better alignment before.
That's true. So maybe a little bit quicker to get from Earth to Mars. But all told, they've been working together on this mission for at least a few months and had been training for who knows how much longer before that. So clearly had a lot of time to build up that kind of rapport and relationship so that they can joke around amongst each other quite easily. Yeah.
And then even after the team leaves and then you see Watney on the planet alone, the movie does a very good job of setting up the stakes.
Right.
Like immediately, like Watney has the piece of metal in his chest.
The antenna.
Yeah, and you just you feel you feel what he's going through there, and then he goes through just kind of what he needs to do to survive, and he lists all these things. He says, if the oxygenator stops working, I'm going to suffocate. If the water regulator stops working, I'm going to dehydrate.
Yeah,
if there's a breach, I'm just going to sort of explode. Yeah. And if I run out of food, then I'm going to starve to death. And then even if all that works out, then it's still 4 years.
Right.
So it does a very good job of setting up that the stakes and everything.
Exactly. Yeah. The audience can very easily see, oh yeah, this is kind of bad that he's on Mars, but do we quite grasp the intensity? To what extent is this pretty bad that he's by himself on Mars? But he's probably one of the best of the 6 to be left on Mars alone, considering he is a botanist.
Yeah.
So
only one that can multiply his food source.
Right, and try and figure out how to science it up and change these potatoes into more potatoes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting way that we have this character figure out, well, if I'm going to have to survive for the next 4 years, these are the steps that I have to go through. So it's very nice that it allows for the audience to follow along with his thought process of, well, I don't want to die. I don't want to just, waste away here on Mars. So let's see what I can do to make it through this.
Yeah. So, having him do the video logs throughout the entire movie was definitely a very good choice. Yeah. Allowing us to hear all that. Mm-hmm. And definitely, just his humor kind of comes through as well. Right. So you get just kind of, you understand more of who he is as a character through them. Yeah. Like there are several times when he's doing these video logs where immediately before the video log, we see people at NASA, or we see some of the other scientists talking about the issues that he's going to have to go through and all the problems that he's going to have to overcome. And they say something to the effect of, well, it seems as if he's likely going to die there on Mars. And then it cuts to Watney saying, well, I'm probably going to die on Mars if I have to listen to another one of these god-awful disco songs. Yeah. Which, I mean, I can kind of understand that if you were stuck for 4 years listening to the same type of music over and over, watching the same type of television shows over and over again, it would start to drive you a little stir-crazy. Yeah, that was pretty funny. I did find it a little unrealistic, because it's not like music and movies take up a lot of space on a hard drive. That's true. So, especially, I find it strange that the commander was the only one that brought anything like that. Anything like that, yeah. I mean, you would think this is supposed to be set, like 20-something years into the future, 2035, something like that. And so it's somewhat near future, but future enough that we're already in current day making leaps and bounds in terms of storage space and what we are able to encode and things like that. You would think that they would be able to bring a lot more stuff, especially considering it's just kind of data. Yeah. So it's not like the physical objects that some of them brought, which again, that makes more sense, that they would have to restrict, okay, you can only bring this much weight or this much volume worth of stuff. Yeah. It also does seem strange that all the media that they brought is kind of old to us, even though it's set in the future, because like Johansson, Kate Mara's character, had a couple video games on her computer, but there were these old, like the Leather Goddesses of Phobos, which was like a old DOS game. Right. So and her character is supposed to be like this really young character compared to some of the other characters. Yeah. So she would have been probably born after 2000, or right around 2000 or so. Yeah. So it's like that type of game is even before her time. So very, very interesting how they. The game's probably before most of their time, because Watney would have been born in like the 90s or probably, something. So so it's kind of strange, but it's an interesting choice to. If we tried to do something that would have been their childhood, nostalgic for them, it'd been like, well, that's kind of like nowadays video games, but that wouldn't quite have the same feel, I guess. Yeah. So the location with Watney being stuck on Mars, we get a very interesting storytelling kind of aspect coming into play here, in that most stories, most movies have a clear protagonist and an antagonist. Some kind of good guy that we're supposed to root for and some kind of bad guy. Well, I feel like we kind of have a good guy to root for. We have Watney, we have the NASA team trying to rescue him. Yeah. But it's not necessarily very clear what or who the protagonist would be. Yeah. So, I mean, we get kind of the classic kind of man versus man versus self. So like maybe we see a little bit of that man versus self, or this man versus environment, man versus nature, I think you called it. Yeah. Yeah. So we have a little bit of that, him trying to fight back against the climate and the land of Mars. So we do have a little bit of that as
kind of an antagonist.
Yeah, even there are some like conflicts at NASA between different characters, but
Right.
all of them you can kind of you understand both sides. It's not like there's a one who's right and one who's wrong.
Yeah, like Sean Bean's character. It's kind of a hard dilemma. This question of
whether or not to tell the crew that Watney's alive.
Yeah, because they tried to search for him.
Yeah.
And off of the sensors, he was dead. There was no life off the sensors, so they had every reason to think we just need to go. We need to save ourselves.
Yeah.
And we can't just stay here in the storm. So they had every reason to believe he had died and they should go. But of course, as they're going back to Earth, they're trying to cope with that. If they then had to also cope with the fact that they left him there alone, alive, the difficulty presented in trying to finish and complete that mission would be compounded a multitude of times. But at the same time, you would think were kind of trained in such a way to be prepared for certain aspects of that. But again, emotionally trying to cope with that's a very different thing.
Definitely. So this being the Ares 3, it would be the third mission of this sort. There actually has already been an Ares 1. I didn't read into what it was yet. So they've made up one Ares 2 mission between now and the movie.
Between now and 2035.
So it's kind of interesting that it only took that many tries, because like the lunar, it was Apollo 11 that made it to the moon. So
Apollo 11, Apollo 13, So we see clearly we've made some bounds in terms of the technology, or we made a change in how we name these missions. Ares 1, 1.3, 1.7, 1.72. So like Ares 3, they're already on Mars. They're already living on Mars to some degree. They have these habitats. So very interesting that they've already gotten to that point, that they're developing that. And yet it seems as if the timeline for Ares 4 and Ares 5 seem further off. That like seems as if they really kind of already got into Ares 3, and I would imagine they're already preparing to send more people for the next ones, but not necessarily the case there.
I mean, the movie's set in 2035, so we have almost 20 years between now and then. So to give one, and then it was just like 4 years before they sent the next
one.
That was actually when they would get there, so it could be 3 years.
That's true, because it would take a little while. So
and the map for the next one was already there, so they definitely were.
They had planned ahead.
Yeah.
But still, I guess space travel, even at that point, is going to be a very long-term thing. They hadn't quite figured out how to travel much faster yet, which is a different thing. But interesting. Going back to the storm where Watney gets injured, I thought it was kind of strange that we see the characters leave the Hab and they've scrubbed the mission, they have their suits on, and begin making their way to the rocket to try and get back out. And of course, we want to see the actors' faces, so we have all these lights shining directly onto their faces so we can see them. And so we have this kind of helmet kind of view where there's some lights shining out in front of them and around them, but there's many more lights that seem shining in towards them, which to me would seem a little distracting. Yeah,
there are even like lights inside the helmet, which would seem like they would reflect off the glass. To make it hard to see through.
Right, yeah. They mention in the book that, and this is also what seems a little bit more realistic, you look at the spacesuits that we use nowadays, and they have kind of that goldish, reflective kind of glass where you can't really see into it. and that's what they had in the book as well. So when,
although I think typically that's only used for like if you're like in space with no atmosphere between you and the sun.
Exactly, you try and protect from the radiation. But I remember reading the media director was saying that she wanted a picture, and in the movie, Watney does this fawns kind of a stance pose, and the media director doesn't want to use that. Feels like she can't use that. Yeah. It says that she wants a picture of his face. She wants just a normal shot of his face to be able to do this. In the book, the reason she says that she wants a shot of his face is because he was in Mars. He had the shield down, so you couldn't really see that it was him. So a little bit of a difference, a little bit of discrepancy between where they're trying to keep the same ideas in the book and in the movie, but then switch things around a little bit to be able to keep the actor's face on screen.
Yeah.
We also see prior to the storm and after this storm that knocked out Watney, that the sun and the atmosphere and the sky around Mars is this very vibrant, bright red, and the sun is this very nice orange, large sun that we're kind of used to seeing here on Earth. But apparently, looking at pictures that we've collected of Mars, it's not quite, even though it is the red planet, it's not quite as red as that, especially when we're looking at the storms and the dust clouds that are there. It creates a very gray, blue, kind of a dull kind of color to it, this very bland kind of color to it. So not something that would really work well for a movie if you're trying to say, yeah, we're on Mars, look at this gray-blue world we're in with red dirt.
Yeah, so not exactly the best color palette to work with.
Yeah. Though immediately after the storm, when we get back to Watney, and we do find out that he is alive, he's got that metal antenna sticking out of him.
Yeah.
And his first problem is, I have to get this out of me and stop the bleeding. And I am very squeamish when it comes to blood, and needles, and knives, and anything of the sort. So it was definitely a little bit difficult trying to watch this surgery scene where he uses this mirror to visualize and be able to see what he's doing. But seems to me accurate that if you were to perform surgery on yourself, you couldn't really just look down at yourself and try and pull stuff out. You'd have to have some kind of setup. So very interesting that he was able to go through with that kind of procedure.
Yeah, and I definitely think that from the movies that we've watched before, this one definitely has a lot that sort of effect of blood and of wounds is probably the best we've seen.
Very realistic
so far.
Yeah, it's also the most recent, most recently released movie that we've seen. So that definitely adds a little bit of something to it, maybe.
Yeah. One thing I thought that was interesting, just the way that this movie was done, was the conversations that people had, for information to travel from Mars to Earth would take between 15 to half an hour, 15 minutes to half an hour.
Yeah.
But they would sort of play with it where you would actually see people kind of talking to each other.
Yeah.
Where it was more immediate.
Yeah. It seems kind of like that text messaging kind of thing almost to it, this instant messaging.
And you'd see people like reacting to something that someone wrote as they were writing it.
As they were writing it. Yeah.
Which I kind of thought that did it. It sort of added, because you could see the relationships better between characters, so I thought that was a good...
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so especially between Mark Watney and the other crew of the Ares 3 versus Mark Watney and the people back at NASA, and then the crew of Ares 3 and NASA, we see like this kind of interesting dynamic between these different groups. And even at NASA, we get lots of different people wanting to respond in different ways, which I was surprised, especially during some of those instant messaging scenes, that it was just like a couple guys just kind of talking and sending messages to the crew or to Mark, whereas in a more realistic setting, I would believe that we would probably have several dozen people working in a team, probably trying to figure out, okay, what exactly do we say? How do we say it? When do we tell them this? Why do we hold this information back and tell them this? You'd think that there'd be a lot more behind the scenes thought process going into this discourse.
I mean, it was like the top three. Like typically, the people having the conversations were like the top three of NASA. So,
right. Yeah. It makes sense, especially considering in a movie we don't want to unnecessarily introduce several dozen characters. Even at the I think it was JPL, where they're doing some of the engineering stuff, we get a bunch of those like younger and some of the other engineers and people working on these problems, and we see Bruce is kind of running the group, and so he's kind of the face that we see most of the time, but we do occasionally see some of the other people on that team.
Yeah.
So we get a little bit of that, but not quite the extent that I would imagine.
Yeah.
So we have the book here in front of us, and there are several movies that we're going to be talking about, and I guess have talked about that are based around books or other stories that have already been told. So it's kind of interesting to look at and compare the original medium to the film, to the movie.
Yeah.
And I've read a lot of Michael Crichton and Jurassic Park and Prey and all these other kind of science fiction, like these a little bit harder science kind of books, if we want to say that they're hard science necessarily, that deal a lot with talking about how could this actually happen, if this were to actually happen, and would this be feasible. And I feel like the book goes into a lot of really neat details about the science and about how he performs these different experiments and how he prepares the soil for the potato plants, and how they go over the Rich Purnell maneuver and go into all the physics and everything. So very interesting how they do that in the book. But what I was even more excited about was how much they actually did that in the movie as well.
Yes.
There's some movies that just kind of hand wave it and say, oh yeah, this is what happens, and there's some kind of proton accelerator or something or other that does it. And it's like, oh, okay, we say science jargon, science terminology, and it just works. But they actually go into a little bit more of it here in the movie and in the book. So really kind of a neat thing to be able to see them do.
Yeah, I like some of these. I like these books or stories that are more closer to our time.
Right.
Where it just kind of has like maybe one or two technologies that are more advanced. And
right.
It feels a lot more like something that could happen within a few years.
Yeah, yeah. Rather than the Jetsons, where it's like, oh, they have flying cars and robot Roomba things that speak to us. Which, I don't know. Maybe we're not that far off.
Maybe not.
But yeah, we also see a lot more character interactions and some different character interactions between some of the characters in the book versus what happens in the movie. I feel like in the book, Rich Purnell, he's kind of like, it seems almost like a student.
Yeah.
But he's almost kind of like he's working for them maybe somewhere. I don't know. It's a little strange. It says he's like in astrophysics or something. Astrodynamics. And in the book, reading it from where I'm coming from, it seems as if he's more nerdy, kind of standoffish, and not quite used to interacting with people, and he comes up with this maneuver, and that's the end of kind of his plot point. But in the movie, we have Donald Glover playing Rich Purnell, and he comes across as like this kind of almost eccentric kind of character, sleeping in his office, waking up, drinking coffee, and then immediately spitting it out into a waste bin that has holes in it, and coffee goes everywhere. Maybe it wasn't even coffee. But we see that his interaction with the characters and the other people there at NASA still has a little bit of that kind of weird interaction.
Still a bit nerdy, bit of that sort of social, not really knowing what to do, but it's a different sort of
It's a different awkwardness. Feel. Yeah, and I feel like I liked that kind of characterization a lot more than what I picked up from the book. I liked how Donald Glover portrayed that character.
Yeah.
Well, let me think through this problem and sit there, and then I'm just gonna go up to this guy, Teddy, the head of NASA, director of NASA. And I don't know who he is, but I'm just gonna pull the pen out of his pocket and say, "This is how it works." And so, a very very fun kind of character that is different from how the book portrayed it. So some of those changes I think are welcome and can be good.
So after Watney leaves to start heading towards the Ares 4 MAV, he says the line, "I'm the first person to be alone on the planet."
Yeah.
And I like it kind of gives an interesting feel, or just a lot of things to think through there, because he also says every time he goes somewhere, he's the first person to have been there. It just gives a lot of interesting psychology to what one person being alone on a planet.
Yeah. I get the feeling that in the book, going back to the book a little bit, he has these moments of self-doubt and I'm done. This is it. I've made too many mistakes, and now there's no way I'm coming back from this.
Yeah.
But in the movie, it seems as if he's much more optimistic. In the book, he does find solutions to these problems, but does have that kind of immediate, I'm going to have this tantrum of, well, this is the end.
Yeah.
Whereas in the movie, they tend to show a little bit less of that and kind of get straight into, well, here's the problem and what am I going to do to fix it? So kind of a little bit more of that pragmatic, just jump right into solution mind, kind of what do we need to do to work through this issue.
Yeah, I also kind of like how a lot of times he looks at things, it's just kind of portrayed as humor throughout the movie, but he'll, like when he says that he's a space pirate because of different laws, he just kind of like goes through all of this, and he just kind of focuses on that rather than sort of the daunting task.
Yeah.
Or the fact that he colonized Mars because he planted food there.
Yeah. So like coping with being by himself for however many days or souls it had been, he uses that humor as a way to kind of work through some of those issues of, well, instead of worrying about I need to figure out a way to make more food, or all my food just got flash frozen by this rushing of the Mars atmosphere into the HAB, he thinks about the fact that he colonized it because he was the first one to grow stuff. So that humor that kind of comes throughout the film is a nice way to kind of ease up on the tension that we have throughout the film. Because of course this is a pretty daunting, intense kind of idea, this concept of what if someone were left on a planet all by themselves, all alone, right? Yeah. What kind of psychological toll is that going to have on them? What kind of physical toll? What kind of emotional toll? So it's very interesting how Mark Watney's character uses these different humorous and even sometimes very logical things, like the maritime law. It's like, well, of course, it logically follows, and all that it implies with this idea that I'm going through here, I'm a space pirate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's humorous, but at the same time, it's this kind of logical kind of progression. It's not necessarily going to have to be humorous. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very interesting how he does that.
One thing I think this movie does really well is the pacing of the movie. I think it does a good job of setting up these different problems throughout the movie.
Yeah.
And then some of them it will choose to show how he succeeds and overcomes this, and some of them he will fail.
Yeah.
And I think it does has a good balance of success to failure.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. With especially when we have that escalation of tension where, you know, we have the storm, and so everyone thinks like, oh well, Mark Watney's character says, well, we gotta stay and finish the mission.
Yeah.
The captain says, no, we're scrubbing the mission, we're heading out. And everyone seems okay. Everyone's like, okay, fine, we're trained for this, we're ready, we're good to go. And then they leave, and we are hit with this problem of Watney's character being removed from the rest of the group. So like we have an issue, a decision is made, and everything's good, and then it's hit back with something that's even worse.
Yeah.
And so like we have this kind of this back and forth of problems presented, some kind of solution, a worse problem, a solution that may or may not work. It does work, but then we have this other issue, or it doesn't work, and so now we have this larger hurdle that we have to overcome. So like it's a very interesting kind of flow throughout the movie,
and also just the entire setting just kind of it naturally gives this sort of escalation of, because as he goes on, he's going to run out of more and more food.
Right.
So it just kind of naturally has this where he just, the longer he stays there, the more he needs, the longer he can't stay there anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We have like even with the habitat, the hab that he's living in, using the same door over and over again.
Yeah.
It wasn't really designed to be constantly coming in and out, and led to that explosion of the hab. So these issues that he's trying to overcome, some of them are simply because of the fact that he's stuck on Mars, living on Mars, a considerable, much longer time than was initially planned. So some of these issues aren't even ones that they necessarily could have planned for, prior. Like, well, what happens if we open this door 900 times over the course of a few months or a year or so. So very interesting how that those problems arise.
Yeah. So one theme of this movie, it kind of keeps coming back, is just kind of solving these problems.
Yeah.
And it even ends on Watney kind of talking to these. He gets back home and he's talking to these kids that want to become astronauts. And he's telling them that going to space truck or doing this sort of job, all it is just you're faced with problems and you have to solve them. And once you solve one problem, you go to the next.
Right.
And once you solve enough problems, you get to come home.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting idea, and to me it seems idealistic and too simplistic. But at the same time, he is speaking. I mean, it might just be that this is the first day of class or something for these new recruits. But yeah, there's a truth to it in that when problems arise, you have to figure out, well, how do we work the problem? What do we know about the problem? What are going to be different ways to approach it? Who can we ask for advice? Who do we speak to? We have these people down at NASA. We have the other crew on the Ares 3 mission still.
Yep.
How can we work through these problems and try and come to the most viable solution?
Yeah, even on the Ares, or not the Ares, the ship that it's coming back. The captain says something. Hermes, yes.
Hermes.
The captain says something similar, when they're going to pick up Watney and they're going too fast and they're off course.
Yeah.
And she says to them, we need to work through the problems. Just focus, work through the problems.
Just focus. Yeah. Yeah. It's something that I think it was the captain and I guess the pilot Martinez were both military.
Yeah.
Whereas the others were, I guess, non-military, civilian. So the training there being a little bit different kind of background. So like the mindset of, how do we deal with, leaving a person behind and then having to go back and try and extract them and rescue them.
Yeah.
That kind of mindset of, well, how do we focus on this problem? What do we need to focus on when we're working through this problem? And when things go wrong, that idea of, well, how do we stay focused when we're way off course and we're speeding through space faster than we're able to pick Watney up. So it's very interesting to see how the different characters try and overcome that and try and stay focused and stay working through that problem.
Yeah, I definitely think having these different perspectives kind of gives an interesting look, like especially when Sean Bean's character sends that information of the Rich Purnell maneuver,
right?
Of adjusting course to go save Watney, and you see them all around the table talking. Like some of them have kids and families back home,
right?
And they'd be leaving them for like almost another year,
right? Yeah. So it's a tough thing that they have to talk through, but almost unanimously, they all decide, well, we have to go back for him.
Yeah.
And I think from the book, I don't remember this part quite as well, but I thought I remembered that in the movie they kind of just sit there at the table and decide, yes, this is what we're doing. But I thought the captain said, okay, well, we're just going to take some time to sit apart from each other and think through this, and then we're going to almost kind of like cast ballots of throw in yes or no. No one's going to know who said yes, who said no, but if there's one single no, we're not going to do it. So it seems as if they didn't quite get into that tension in the movie. Yeah. Which makes sense that they're getting close to the end of the movie. They don't have time to throw everything in.
It does also seem interesting because like most of the characters seem really, really willing to go back. Like, Martinez and Johansson both kind of immediately kind of say
jump right in.
We're going back, right? And, but then Beck and Vogel kind of they seem to be thinking through it a little bit more of like what this really means for us, and they seem a bit more apprehensive. But through the conversation, they seem like Vogel almost seems kind of pressured into saying yes. So and they do talk about what would the consequences be. You're never going back into space. This is mutiny. We're taking the ship to a place where we're not being told we're just supposed to take it. They talk about how Johansson and Martinez could potentially be court-martialed. Not Johansson, it's the captain.
The captain, that's right, yeah. They talk about how they could be court-martialed. So definitely they discuss the consequences, but like you said, some of them are so gung-ho, it seems as if maybe they didn't fully think through them. But it's to the benefit of Watney, I guess, that they do go back for him.
Yeah. So one last thing I wanted to just kind of point out was the end credits.
Yeah.
I thought they were very interestingly done, just the way that they're showing the different actors.
Sure, yeah.
Because I've seen this movie kind of, it shows just kind of like where each character has gone. From the end of the movie. Yeah. And I've seen other movies that do this during the credits or before the credits, where typically it's just like a frame within the movie, and it just has a lot of text.
Says what happens.
Yeah, this is actually, it's like it has a scene where you actually see what's going on with them.
Right. Yeah.
And I like it, and just especially with the cinematography, because this whole movie is just really well shot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So very, very, very cool that they had that through the end credits, because I again, going back to the book, I feel like I'm going to the book quite a bit, but it just kind of ends with them pulling Mark Watney back onto the ship, and they turn around and head back to Earth. And the end.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to have a little bit of this epilogue of what were the consequences, what did happen to these characters, and how did NASA, how did the world respond to what ended up happening to what they did, and how this all worked out.
Yeah,
it's very nice.
That will do it for this video. We'd like to thank Mill Eastup for creating our theme.
And join us in the comments section below to go over any questions or add to the discussion on The Martian.
And subscribe so you don't miss our next video, where we are going to discuss Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
This has been FoxTales Movie Club. Thanks for watching. I'm Tony.
I'm Fox, and we will see you in the next video.